Hi, everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of the Dr. Keith Darrow podcast. We have today, I've nicknamed, I'm sure other people have said it too, the king of compression when it comes to hearing aids. I'm so blessed to have Dr. Ted Venema. You all know him. I'm sure you've seen his videos on LinkedIn or YouTube, and if you haven't, go find him. But Dr. Ted, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's
No,
great.
absolutely. Look, I've been following your work for many years from afar, right? Because I've really been watching, and your journey is so interesting, right? Just sort of your typical, I became an audiologist, and then maybe not so typical, got a PhD in audiology, and I've just watched you, right? And I've heard you say this before. You went from the light side to the dark side. So it's been quite a journey. Just tell me a bit about your why, right? Like, why have you done all this and what's driven you on your path?
It's crazy. My bachelor's degree is from Calvin College in philosophy. I studied ancient Greek philosophy with a minor in aesthetics and English. Had nothing to do with audiology at all. And then walking up in a street in Vancouver with my girlfriend at the time, it was, I thought, I got to get a job. I've got to get a real job, you know. And this is 10 years after I graduated. And she said, well, you talk a lot. Why don't you become a speech therapist? So I enrolled in speech language pathology at Western Washington in Bellingham, Washington. And halfway through, I hated it so bad, but I was too far in debt to quit. So I switched to audiology, and I became an audiologist and worked at Canadian Hearing Society in Toronto. And then I thought I really liked ABR. I really liked electrophysiology. And I thought, I'm going to get a PhD. I'm going to go for my post-hole digger degree. So I went to University of Oklahoma, actually first at Arizona, studied with Ted Blatke, and then I went to Oklahoma and finished there. And yeah, my whole dissertation was 250 hertz tone burst ABR. I was interested in low frequency ABR. You know, this was my thing. And then, you know, I taught at Auburn and Alabama for a couple of years. And then I realized, and my daughter was born with a lot of handicaps, and we moved back to Canada because we've got socialized medicine here. And I ended up at Unitron Hearing Aids because that was based in Canada. And I thought, I know nothing about hearing aids. This is not my area.
So this was the slippery slope to the dark side, right?
Yeah.
The PhD goes and works for a manufacturer. Look, I'm just messing with you, really.
I know, like good stuff. But I loved it. They became my alma mater when it comes to compression because I didn't know compression from a hole in the ground. I didn't get it. I thought Class C meant compression. So I bugged the engineers and bugged them and got them to translate engineering-ese into English or into audiology-ese. And I tried to explain compression to myself. I tried to get it. And this was in the 90s, the golden era of compression, because WDRC was just emerging, otoacoustic emissions was just emerging, the K-amp from Meade Killian, all of those things emerged at the same time, and it's no coincidence. That was like a flowering in audiology, because the knowledge of outer hair cells became distinct. And that's why we use WDRC compression. And I linked all kinds of stuff like that together and thought, you know what? You got to write a book on this. So I sat there at the dining room table every Saturday night and talked into a tape recorder out loud and explained things to myself in a way that I wish someone had explained to me. That's really and then I thought, you know, I was teaching at Western University in London, Ontario, the same place where Richard Seawald and the DSL fitting method came from. And I realized then my path is not going to be an associate and then a full professor. I'm not going to become a researcher per se. I think I like explaining things more than anything else. And where to think in our field, who needs explanation? Hearing instrument practitioners. They're not going to go away. We can't blow them off the table. They're here. So just accept it. Just improve their education. Take the thorn out of the lion's paw so that audiologists can't complain about these people having no education. Give them an education. Teach. And so in Canada, we're better equipped in that way because in the States, there's the hearing aid practitioner has a hard time getting a college diploma because a lot of those colleges close because it's never state law that you have to have that diploma. In Canada, it is. So International Hearing Society is no longer good enough for Canada. You have to have a 2-year college diploma in hearing aid sciences. So that's where I teach, and
which is great, right? There was so much in there that I want to unpack. Number one,
sure.
I think everybody who's listening and is in hearing healthcare has, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people have a similar story. I went for SLP and then decided, heck no. I'm not going to spend my days, on the floor playing with blocks, getting people to, look at my lips. Like, no, that can't happen.
Or
right?
The client will say "k," "g," in the initial position of words, given this and this.
Yes.
I just thought I can't do it.
What a mess. But, so I think that's very, very similar. And I love you talking about, because you're bringing me back to my audiology youth. Right? Because I was coming out of grad school right when we were switching over to digital hearing aids, right to the WDRC, the compression. And it's just, that's why I said, I mean, I've known your work for so long, and I really do. I feel a connection, because that's your drive to want to teach, your drive to want to advance the field is so important, and to embrace the diversity of our field, right? Yes, at the end of the day, there will always be audiologist.
Yeah.
There needs to be the hearing instrument specialist, or whatever it's called, acoustician in South Africa. Yeah. I mean, it's got different names, but you get the point.
Sure.
And there'll be the assistant, and there'll be, there's 42, at least in America, there's 42 million people, or actually, globally, 80% of people with hearing loss are not getting the treatment they need.
That's right.
Can we please stop fighting with each other?
I know it.
And try to help more patients, right? If we put all that energy into helping more people, we would make a much bigger dent, rather than saying, well, your degree and my degree. And I have to say, I actually envy what they've done in Canada, because I think it's so important that there is a base of education that is needed, right? I would love to see America sort of get to that point. And I know Ozark, and you've done some work with Ozark Technical College. I believe there's one in Canada, but there's also one in the States. Are they the same thing, or?
Well, they are essentially. They're 2-year. They're AA degrees in the States.
Okay.
And Canada doesn't have AA degrees. Canada calls them 2-year college diploma. And but they're essentially the same thing, but I've tried to teach those students. I tell them, you know what, if you can flip out an audiologist by what you know, then good. Like an old salmon, I can swim up the stream to die. I want you to flip them out by your knowledge that, guess what, outer hair cells sharpen the peak of a traveling wave and increase frequency
Ted,
resolution.
I thought you were saying you should flip them off. I thought that's what you were saying.
But the funny thing is, with audiology, when I got into audiology, it used to be more forensic. Hearing aids was a piece of it, but electrophysiology was there, vestibular was there. It seemed now all of a sudden it's 95% of audiologists are working in the hearing aid retail profession. And so they've become HIP wannabes. They've become so that's why they're all sharing the same field. And that's why I try to teach the hearing aid practitioner. They call them hearing instrument specialists, hearing instrument practitioner. Tell you what, Keith, I can't stand the word instrument. I keep thinking of banjos and pianos. Call them hearing aids, for God's sake. But anyway, because hearing instruments, I'm going to.
Yeah, I mean, look, I try to forgo all of those words, mostly because, if we accept the fact, right? So I think one of the reasons people, the general public, stays away from us is because hearing aids, we have to admit, they have a bad rap. Yeah, should they or shouldn't they is a different discussion. And so we've actually, and I've heard you talk about it too, we've really just switched to, we're treating a major medical condition. Mm-hmm. And yes, we use technology. We do use hearing aids, but today's hearing aids are not the beige bananas of days gone by.
That's the word I always use exactly. I call them that too. They're no longer the analog linear gain hearing, beige bananas. They're quite sophisticated. And I always tell people, think of an amplifier that changes the amount that it amplifies depending on how loud the sound is coming into it. So you're constantly changing the volume control. If you're talking really softly, the volume increases. If I talk loud, it automatically, that's going to cost you some money. That's an interesting amplifier. It's imitating what the outer hair cells are doing on purpose, deliberately. But we can't sharpen peaks of traveling waves with a hearing aid, sorry. So the only thing you can do for that is increase signal to noise ratio. So the twofold role of the outer hair cells, namely amplifying soft sounds and two, sharpening the peak, can be imitated with a hearing aid by A, WDRC, and B, increasing SNR. It's slain and pimple. So that's what we're trying to do, But yes, you need an education so that you become a technologist and not a technician. And so you know the whys behind things. Why do we use spondee words for SRT? Not just that's what you do, but how come you have to? How come single syllable words won't work for that? Because of PI functions. Look at Perform. I teach that in a 2-year college diploma on purpose, deliberately.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. And I'm sure you've read the book or seen the TED series by Simon Sinek. Start with why. Mm-hmm. That's what this is all about. That's the thing. It drives me nuts. And I'm sure it's driven you so nuts that now you do what you do, which is a student comes out and it's like, okay, I'm going to ask you point blank. Why are you doing otoacoustic emissions? Well, I have to measure, and they just what, right? It's like, and they never even explain to a patient why, right? That's one of my biggest pet peeves. Like, I say to my class, to my students, when's the last time a doctor looked in your ear with an otoscope and told you why they were doing it? And they all just look at me like, nobody's ever told me why. Yeah. So there's a perfect example. We need to do better. We need to not only educate each other, but we have to educate our patients. Otherwise, we're just technicians. Look in an ear, raise your hand when you hear a beep, blah, blah, blah.
You want to shine a light on things and thereby make the landscape of the field more visible. Hook things together like a grandma does a rug, like hook the concepts together for the students especially, but even for the public. When you can try and explain what it is you're doing, it's more fun. It's way more. I'll tell you what, when I do speech discrimination testing, I don't even use a CD. I use the live hand. Sorry. It's more engaging. It's more fun. And then I'll take away my hand and do it with visual cues. Hey, guess how much you were using your eyes? Cool. It's when a client can leave an office and think, wow, that was interesting. I never knew that. Or even when I do talks to the public, how come you have a hammer, anvil, and stirrup bone in your middle? Why do you have those 3 stupid little bones? Well, guess what? All mammals have them. And they increase the pressure of airborne sound so it can activate a fluid-filled cochlea. Put your head under a pool. If I talk to you, you're not going to hear me.
I'm telling you, I knew it before we got on here. We are long lost brothers because I'm not kidding. 3 days ago in my hearing science class, I was explaining the function of the middle ear. And I said to my students, all right, imagine this. When's the last time you had a conversation with a friend who had their head underwater in a pool?
Exactly.
And you're walking around the pool and they're under the water. How does that conversation work? And they were all just like, it can't be done. Well, there you go. That's what the middle ear does, because air to the water is a real problem for sound. So we need to conduit, right? I love it.
Mammals, that's how all mammals have a middle ear, and that's why we hear way better than reptiles. I live in East End, Saskatchewan. Google that up, home of T-Rex, the biggest T-Rex dinosaur ever found. And her name was Scotty. I guess they were drinking scotch at the time that they found her. Anyway, reptiles can't hear with a hoot because they don't have a middle ear. Mammals do. So these little mice that could scurry and skitter away because they could hear better. All animals have a vestibular system. which is interesting. Balance you have to have for life, but that cochlea is a sense built, a luxury built on top of balance, which is cool. You know, almost like in speech, it's an overlaid function on top of a thoracic fixation thing, you know, valve. So it's, you know, to look at stuff like that infuses, I think, interest in the field. I'd rather kindle a fire inside someone than under somebody. You know,
I love that. I like that analogy. I want to ask you something because this is definitely off topic, but you said something that really caught my attention about your book.
Oh,
because here's a little, you know, it's not a secret. I don't want to call it that, but you did exactly what I did for my first book, Stop Living in Isolation, right? And because people are like, you wrote a book. Oh my God, you wrote a book. And I'm like, I did. However, it was really just it was a download of my brain. And it was exactly what you said, which is it was an audio version, right? So talk through that process of what it was like writing that book, because I know a lot of people who really, they want to get those ideas out of their brain. They want to be able to write a book, and now it's so easy to self-publish. So just talk through that a little bit.
Well, you know, it was me trying to understand something difficult, which I learned to be compression, which I found to be compression, and understanding these input-output functions and stuff like that. I didn't get it. No one had really, my master's degree in audiology, I didn't grasp that very well. I didn't grasp hearing aid fitting methods. The knowledge that basically they're all based on the half gain rule. They're really based on, and they came out because people didn't have real ear, so they couldn't see what you were hearing. Okay? Liebarger would have given his eye teeth to be able to have real ear probe tube measurements, but they didn't.
Well, so they had to have this. That less than 40% of people are actually doing real ear.
Yeah, well, that in and of itself blows my mind. How does that sound? How does that sound? Well, how does that sound? Well, why don't you do real ear and see what it sounds like anyway? But what drove me to write the book was that kind of stuff. I thought to myself, I'm going to explain stuff in a way that I wish to God someone had explained it to me. So I've learned from my professors, God bless them all, but now I'm internalizing it, and I'm going to explain it to me the way, the stuff that they taught me. I'm going to translate it into TEDx or whatever, so that even when someone reads the book, they'll hear my voice, God forbid, which sounds like geese farts on a muggy day, but who cares? Whatever. You know, I was explaining it in a way that I wish someone had explained to me. I was explaining things to myself because I found that the concept of compression difficult to grasp. So I married it, especially to outer hair cells. But the early type of compression was output limiting, which had nothing to do with hair cells. It was just trying to limit the maximum power output without using peak clipping. It was so it came first. So high ratios and high knee points emerged first. Then came the Renaissance of the mid-1990s, the early 1990s. I think it was a beautiful explosion. And Meade Killian caught it right by the tail, which is fantastic. And then I saw Resound having this loudness growth graph that everybody sees. And I thought, ding, 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 I'm going to run with that because I think stuff is cool. And that stuff isn't, I think if I explain it, even as I'm working for a manufacturer, I'm explaining it to clinical audiologists because I'm trying to sell our product. Well, if I can infuse the selling our product to these hearing aid hearing practitioners, but infuse it with some light and some beauty or some wisdom or something extra, that they go, wow, that was interesting. I never thought of it. Good. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
So I know the book's been updated. I believe you're on the 3rd edition. I mean, where do you get this, right? I mean, I don't think you find it at your local Barnes and Nobles.
Plural publishing. Just because I'm an idiot, I kept a copy here. It's this weird book, pink and white. It's the 3rd edition, but the 1st edition was this yellow one, which looked like it's someone who's putting some white thing in somebody's ear. It was really thin. And this one here, I just included a whole chapter on real ear. probe tube measures.
Is it on Amazon or just Plural?
No, it's on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, but it's from Plural Publishing. It's in San Diego, which used to be singular.
but here's but here's the deal, right? I mean, the sad state or the reality is, because I've had this interaction enough with graduate students or recent graduates. Tell me about compression. Tell me what's actually happening in the technology. And they look at me like I have 10 heads because they're like, well, the software does it for me.
I know.
I push the button.
I know. In other words, do you have problems hearing the preacher every second Sunday at a 45-degree angle? If so, push this button. I know, that really sucks. And that's why I say the 90s was the golden age. Because in the 90s, hearing aids were still analog. And you had to know your compression because otherwise you ordered the wrong aid.
But here's the deal, Ted. Right now, I know, right? The people that are just, whatever, I'll just push a button. Between you and me, they're not listening to this podcast, okay?
No.
But the people who believe in lifelong learning and doing better for their patient, tell me why it's important to know about compression, despite the fact that I could just push a button. Why is this important? How can I still use this? Is it even relevant?
Yeah, okay. I tell my students the same thing. Today's software, you're not sitting there with input-output functions, and you're not adjusting knee points, and you're not adjusting ratios. So who cares? Well, guess what? As you're adjusting the gain in the channels of the hearing aid on the software, you are under the surface changing the compression. All of that's taking place beneath the surface. So no, you'd have to be a geek from hell to sit there adjusting the compression in every stinking channel of today's digital hearing aids. I'd lose my mind if I did that. But I'd also lose my mind if I didn't know, guess what? All of this stuff is going on underneath. Digital hearing aids today emerged as imitations of their analog forebears. They just did it digitally. Okay. Yep. And so you have to understand where we came from. What did Santayana say? Or else you're going to be condemned to repeat your past. So please understand the whys, because when you do, you understand the beauty of the stuff. You understand what makes this field interesting. So yeah, you're just playing around with the software, adjusting the frequency response, because on real ear, you didn't quite get what the software predicted you'd get. You know, maybe you were using Now 1, Now 2, maybe you were using the proprietary fitting software, which kind of gets scary, but at any rate, whatever, you were doing things and you weren't quite hitting target, so you adjusted stuff. But underneath, what you need to know is you're not sitting there with a hearing aid that's amplifying everything. The hearing aid is amplifying specific frequencies using compression ratios like crazy to accommodate a listener's dynamic range.
And if you don't know this, then why not just tell your patient to go buy the hearing aid at Best Buy?
Exactly.
And self-program it.
Yeah, go ahead. And you can get OTCs now, over the counter. I used to tease Ozarks that they were Ozarks Technical Community College. I call them OTCs just to bug them. But at any rate.
Yes, I've worked with the one, the one down here in America. And I'm like, really, guys, couldn't you come up with a better acronym? Like, I know it's what it is, but it's like,
I know, it's a funny.
Like you've got a program to sell over-the-counter hearing aids.
I know. and I'm not dead against over-the-counter hearing aids myself. I look at them sort of like reading glasses. You know, they kind of get you into the field a bit. So they're not going to kill you. Some of them are pretty darn good. I know Meade Killian came out with one. You run an ANSI test on it, and it's actually not bad. They're not digital. They use WDRC, though. They're not bad. Like the equivalent input noise, the harmonic distortion, pretty good.
Yeah, but look, arguing, that's another thing, right? So we talked earlier about if we're going to sit around and argue about who's got a better education, like, that's dumb. We're not helping more patients. If we're going to sit around and focus on, oh my God, over-the-counter hearing aids, we're like, stop it.
The sky is falling. The sky is falling, you know.
No, it's not. You know what? I actually think all ships are rising.
Yeah, I do too.
It's the exact opposite. It's not the sky is falling. It's the more we all talk about the importance of treating hearing loss. And now
Exactly.
our job's different because for once, thank goodness, if we're going to lead with, well, I dispense hearing aids, well, guess what? Now that's not special anymore. So what is it about you that's actually special? We've got to dive much deeper than I can give you a hearing aid. I can give you a test drive. I can give you free batteries for life. Like, we've got to go deeper than that.
Yeah, exactly. The whole thing's add to the picture. So over-the-counter hearing aids today. And the interesting thing, the audiologist's education. I love this argument. I went to school for 6-7 years to be able to do this, and you did. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you happen to be in university where you got your bachelor's of science or something in whatever, biology, physics, math. And then you were in your third or junior year, and you realize, geez, I've got to get myself a job when I'm done. Oh, I've heard of this field called audiology. Why don't I apply for my AUD? Well, now you've got your bachelor's, so you already happen to be in the university track. So for you to pursue an AUD, great, fine. But for Joe Blow, who came out of 12th grade and didn't have that, for that person to get into the field, guess what? There should be another route. And that's what I believe in. And I don't think someone needs an AUD to fit a hearing aid right. It's good if you do, but you don't necessarily need it. And I'm going to prove it. I'm going to teach as hard as I can, but I'm going to try and just shine a light on the beauty of our field and the majesty of that cochlea, which is a trip. I mean,
if you've got the passion, if you've got the drive, if you have the why, I don't care what your credentials are.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. If you're willing to learn, if you're willing to wake up every day and be better than the day before, like, there are bad apples in every orchard. There are plenty of salesy, sleazy AUDs, and there are plenty of great ones. And the same goes for the hearing instrument specialist. Let's just get over it and let's help more patients. That's all that matters.
Yep, I agree. Communication is best. Communication between the AUDs and the HIPs. I mean, or your HISs as they call them sometimes.
Yeah.
I like that open communication. And it's, that's why you'll see a lot of audiologists with AUDs presenting at conferences for the state hearing aid associations. You see a lot of it. I'm one of them, but guys, David Fabry, and
I'm one of them too. I'm always honored. Like, you mean to tell me that there are more people that want to learn the way I do it, the way I think about it, because I have a proven track record of success? Absolutely. I would love to share that knowledge so that we can help more patients, right? We all grew up saying we want to help more people, so let's do it together.
Yeah, hey, I agree.
Dr. Ted, I am so grateful for your time. I'm looking at the clock. I know you teach class soon, so I want to be respectful of your time.
Hey.
I want you to tell me, before we go, I want you to tell me some personal nugget, something that you've gotten out of all of this that you want to share with everybody.
Some nugget that I've gotten out of all it. I'll tell you something. It keeps me busy. It keeps me interested. It keeps me going. I'm 67 years old by now, but I feel way, way younger than that. I like the field because I never heard of it before. It's completely from my bachelor's degree, which has nothing to do with this field whatsoever. I think that's what's kind of neat, is having a big variety in life. And they can call me some big specialist in audiology or whatever. And I sometimes laugh at it because I'm thinking to myself, I'm not necessarily the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm some guy who failed 10th grade math and had to go to summer school. Grade 11 math. In Canada, we always say grade 11. In the States, they say 11th grade. I've always noticed that. We say Z, you guys say Z. Anyway, but I've always find that kind of interesting. But, I have a part-time job. I'm the caretaker at the East End Cemetery. I like doing that, too. Totally different. I fill gopher holes on
Well,
and
there
mow
you go.
lawns.
Well, now
You
we
know,
definitely
so
learned something about Dr. Ted that I don't think many
exactly.
people knew.
A
And
wide
look, hey,
variety in life is good.
I don't want to get into it because it still brings back bad memories, but I got kicked out of high school twice. So, from one guy who went to summer school, one guy, I mean, you and I probably would have caused a lot of trouble in the neighborhood
I'll bet.
back then. But you're right. I love your story. You found something that you're passionate about
Yeah.
and you believe in the core value of lifelong learning. Dr. Ten Venema, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey.
Thank you for sharing, being open, and doing more to help this field help more patients.
Thank you, Keith, for having me. It's been a good slice and a thick one. Good stuff.
Have a great day.
You too, guy. All right. Adios.